Hi, my name's Dan. I hope you're doing well today. I've been a professional bass player for 19 years now, and I know a lot of people that watch my channel, either beginners or people that are coming back to it from a long time away and just don't want to be a professional bass player. Not a problem, but I'm going to teach you loads of things that you can actually use in your playing, in your practice, that's hopefully going to give you a bit of a shortcut. In this lesson, I'm going to be talking about a lot of things, but not to worry. I've written the blog post with loads of free lessons in it. So watch this first, then click the link below, and you can go and actually learn some of this stuff. Now, there's a reason that Pino is probably the most popular bass player of the last 30 years. He's played on everything from Elton John fretless stuff, Paul Young in the 80s, to D'Angelo, to The Who, to Adele. That guy plays on everything. Now, he's not very flashy, but he just sits in the pocket in any musical genre, from Nine Inch Nails to John Mayer. His tone is incredible. It's very often a P bass, and it's very often, just in the background, but his timing is amazing. His fills, his melodic playing is just brilliant. And the people love that. He doesn't do anything too flashy, but he just always adds to the music without getting in the way. Other musicians, they're not looking for you to be flashy. They're not looking for a bass solo in general. They're looking for you just to play a really great, tasteful sounding bass line with good tone and feel. Two areas that are going to help your bass playing immensely are technique and timing. Concentrate on these two things. Here's a great exercise you can use. All I was doing there was putting the metronome on beats 2 and 4 at 120 beats per minute and playing this exercise. If you do this kind of thing every day, you combine technique, and there I was going, little hammer on, little ghost note, and just trying to make it feel really good. And playing along to a metronome, it has to be in time. And if you're playing lots of sessions, you've got a click in your ear, and you have to do that. You have to play in time. So if you do this every day, your timing is just going to improve no end. When you do this for a living, you find yourself having to play different types of music. Even if you're not very strong in one area, you will be called to play that style very often. So, pop, funk, jazz, blues, country, hip hop, all of these styles of music, you need to be able to play them authentically as a professional bass player. And what happens when you do that is, far from being overwhelmed by all these different things, you start to realize that a lot of bass playing just uses a handful of key concepts, and everything is quite similar. If I'm playing a D and I'm playing, like a funk type of a thing that I'll make up, and that's sort of like a country-ish type of a groove, and that's like a soul type of a groove. I'm using the same collection of notes, but just by altering the feel and the way you play it, you realize that you're suddenly in different genres. So you get an appreciation for what makes up different styles of music. It just makes you a more rounded musician. Here's probably my best practice tip, is that you're going to learn the most out of music from learning music, not from learning scales and modes, although I'll talk about that, and it's incredibly important. It's going to the source, which is all the great bass lines that are out there already and continue to be created every day. Just listen to the stuff that you like, and listen to the different styles of music that I was talking about, and learn that music. You can then link to scales and what they are at a later point, but just do that as soon as you can. Learn bass lines. The most leaps I've had in my ability on this instrument has come from just learning hard bass lines that I can't play at the time. You just learn so much from that. You're often asked to play like a famous player, James Jamerson or Jacko or Flea. That happens a lot, so you need to know the key bass players, going all the way back from Jamerson, Jacko to John Entwistle to, amazing players that we have now. This is linked to the learning different styles, but you need to know your history and your key bass players, and that's really going to help you. Become a musical sponge for all these different styles, all these different players. They all play in a different way. They place the beat in a certain way. They have different techniques. The more people you listen to, actually, the more that your voice is going to come out, because you're going to like certain players, the way they do things more than others, and you can just almost subconsciously bring it all in, and what will come out is you, so you're not copying anyone by doing this. You're ultimately just helping your own style. If you were to ask a load of professional musicians what the number one skill for a musician is, they're probably, a lot of them would say, having a good ear. If you're listening to music, if you're learning from music, then you need a good ear to decipher and decode what you're hearing. But also, if you're on a gig and you hear a musician play something, you can react to it. You can listen to what others are doing and react. It's all about that. It's being inclusive. And for bass players, if you're playing with a drummer and they're placing the beat in a certain way, you need to be receptive to that. You need to have a good enough ear to understand that and adapt. If you hear a guitarist playing a chord and you can locate, okay, right, it's an E flat going to an F, both major, that's a major third, that's a major third. This happens in a split second with training, but you hear that. Then you can improvise and jam around that. And having a good ear just opens up everything for you. If you can play, like I said before, with very good tone, good timing and feel, and you've got decent technique, then your ear allied to that just makes everything easier. Now, this leads us all to music theory. This is a big area of music, and it's something that a lot of people are a bit scared of, a bit frightened of. But far from stifling your creativity, like a lot of people think it does, music theory opens up a whole world of creativity for you. They say knowledge is power. Well, knowledge is creativity. If you can take a scale and create with it, here's a Dorian mode. That's a scale. I know it in different parts of the neck, and we're going back to what I was talking about before, good sense of rhythm, timing, technique, all those kinds of things. Then I can use the theoretical knowledge of this scale and bring it alive with, technique and rhythm. As a working bass player, you're very rarely asked to play anything too complicated. Listen to social media or watch social media and you'll hear the most crazy, unbelievable bass playing you've ever heard. In the working real world and in music in general, no, you don't hear that. You just need a bass player that plays like Pino, really, really solid, and that's what you want to work on. That's not to say you shouldn't work on your technique. If you really work on your technique and play sort of beyond where you need to be, then of course when you're playing bass normally, you'll feel more comfortable. Do work on your technique, do practice all the cool things you want to be able to do. So if on the rare occasions you're asked to do those things, it's great to be able to do it. Most of being a professional musician is about being prepared. I once did a gig where I'd worked for a conductor for years, and I did with my drummer friend. We used to go every year down to the south coast of England and play with his little choral group, and it was very lovely. Pretty easy music. He'd send us the music really in advance, which is quite unusual. People tend to just give you the music on the day. And so he would send us the music, and I'd look at it the night before, and that was it. And then we'd have a rehearsal. And this one time he sent me the music and I just assumed it was that same gig. But I actually opened it about a week before. Thank goodness I did, because this is what I was confronted with. And I'd seen 64th notes, which I'd never really seen before. And I tell you what, if I'd opened this the day before, I don't know what would have happened. I had to practice for hours and hours to get this up to speed. Look, it said 5-string fretless. Then it was Lawrence Cottle who's played on the original, and it was like an orchestral concerto thing in this cathedral, and I was one of the main soloists. I wasn't told this. He just assumed that because I played for him before, you can do that easy. I didn't even have a 5-string fretless. But the moral of the story is, I opened the package a week before. I nearly had a heart attack, but I had enough time to just go through it, practice, and I got through the gig. There's a huge industry around bass gear. We love it. Look at the big YouTube channels. They're all about gear. There's an industry behind this. But no one cares about your bass gear. Not the artist, not your bandmates, Actually, there's one person that does, and that's the bass player in the audience, who will ask you about string gauges afterwards. You know, it's kind of true. We're really, really into this, aren't we? And I think I've been down this rabbit hole before, where you get obsessed with gear, and maybe the actual playing side of things goes by the wayside. But, you know, people just want you to sound good, meaning, you know, your bass is set up well, no buzzers, no rattling, no out of tune. You're sort of in the background and you're not noticeable. Unfortunately, that's sort of the way it goes for bass players. If you do a really decent job in a professional situation, often no one will say anything, and that's good. They don't need to say anything. You're doing a good job. The only time anyone went crazy about gear I had was when I was playing this gig. I was using this electric upright. That's Carla Bruni there, the old French president's wife, and that bass isn't even plugged in. And the artists and the people working on the show, everyone just commented on it because it looks crazy, you know. A bass guitar looks just like a sort of, people call it, they think it's a guitar, they don't really know what it is, but you're in the background and just no one cares. I'm not saying don't care about your gear and don't get into it, because we all love it and that's cool, but just, you know, invest in some decent gear, work on getting a good sound out of it, and then just practice your skills. Having said that, one thing I've noticed is that producers, especially of a certain age, they love Fender Precision basses. Don't know what it is, but if I went into a studio with that crazy looking electric upright bass, it's the wrong instrument. If I went in with a 6-string bass, that's probably the wrong instrument as well. A Fender Precision just is one of these basses that's been recorded loads. Fender Jazz as well, if you have both of these things. And you go in, it'll cover most basses most of the time, and people just love the look of it. They're reassured by it. So, you know, that bass is a good one to think about if you're looking for one. When you're on a gig, be professional, prepared, punctual, and easy to get on with. That last point is just one of the biggest things. If you can play fairly well and people like being around you, you get loads of work. Leave the histrionics to singers. And, you know, having said that, all the session singers that I've ever worked with, you know, do the same thing as I do, but the singing version, they're the same. Really, really professional. You have to be. People aren't going to work with you if not. So translates to you, do the same. If you're going to rehearsals, if you've got gigs, be on time, have gear that's well maintained, be prepared, know what you're going to play, don't waste anyone's time, and just be a decent person. One of the most useful skills I've ever learnt as a professional musician is how to read music and how to make charts. I once did a wedding gig where it was a big, big gig, obviously thousands and thousands of pounds spent on this amazing wedding in this incredible venue. And about 15 minutes before going on, I'd realised that I'd learnt the wrong first dance. It was the same name as another song, but I can't remember what it was, but I think it was a Michael Bublé thing, and I learnt the other one. But I didn't panic. All I had to do was listen to the correct Bublé version, and I just knocked up a little chart and, you know, got my bass here and just got the root notes, found the chart, and that goes back to theory. You can hear the chord progressions going on, and no dramas. I just read it straight off. We'd never played it before with anyone else, but I had no need to panic. And that was the sort of reading thing. There wasn't enough time for me to memorize and learn that song, but the reading got me out of trouble. I've done gigs in the West End on Les Miserables, and that's a reading gig. You can't do that gig if you don't read. You know, a lot of people that contact me play in church on Sunday and rehearsal bands, this kind of thing. And the better you are at, you know, someone giving you a chart and you just reading it and making a bass line out of it, I mean, that's a really, really good skill to have. I've got some videos on that. I'll link to those. But I really recommend that you learn at least basic reading skills in terms of notation and charts. Steve Gadd and Tony Levin, great rhythm section. They met at school. I think Marcus Miller and Omar Hakim as well. There's loads and loads of examples of just people have had amazing careers and got into great bands just by, you know, bass players, just by knowing a drummer. And it is kind of true that the biggest connection that you can have is with a drummer. Try your best to find the most amazing, best drummers in your area and just hang on to their coattails. I know loads of bass players have had amazing careers through just knowing great drummers. And often a drummer will sort of take you along as part of the rhythm section. So, you know, in your area, just try and play with drummers, because they're going to help you with your timing. Don't rely on their timing. Make sure that you work on your own inner clock. But there's a magic that happens with a great rhythm section that just can't be replicated, you know, playing with a metronome. After nearly 20 years of no job other than bass playing, and 30 years of playing, the more I learn, the more I realize that there's actually only a few things that you need to get really good at. And it's all about ignoring all the other noise. Work on your timing, work on your groove. In terms of scales, how many times have I... the pentatonic scale. It's a very basic thing. I use it all the time. I love crazy modes and stuff, but how many times do I use that in a professional situation? Hardly ever. How many times do I do double thumbing? Hardly ever. Work on your core skills. Finger style, a little bit of slap, a little bit of plectrum if you want to, broaden the horizons. Learn a few scales. Listen to enough music that you can hear that there's not much going on, and focus on those things that are really, really going to get you further and further along your path. Do that consistently and you're going to become a great bass player. Like I said, there's that blog post below where you can go and learn loads of lessons that go into way more specifics and way more detail than I mentioned today. It's a long journey. If you practice consistently and practice these few things, then you just can't help but become a better musician. It's not about becoming a professional bass player. It's about you maximizing your potential. So if you do have any questions at all, I'm sure you do, get in contact via my website below, or just leave a comment and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.